Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. This is Matt Hiley from Tantalus Systems. We're going to get started on our federal funding update webinar. I do appreciate you all for being here. This is a webinar that will run through funding updates since a previous session that we had in September of 2021. So we do thank you for joining. Probably be about 45 minutes on the call and then leave some time for Q&A. So any questions that you have, you can either use chat for those to get through to me directly, or we will have time at the end of the session to go through any questions that you might have. Just so everyone is aware, as we get kicked off here, I am recording right now, and we'll send out a recording of the webinar for anyone. We also have, for myself and Amanda Wood, who's our main presenter here, our emails are on the ready. So on the last slide, and then the follow-up that we'll provide to you, you will have the ability to contact us with any questions that you might have that we can't answer or don't have time for today. So thanks for that. It kicked off here. So just a quick legal notice. This information is designed for the session today and for the participants that are here. Any questions you have about sharing or otherwise using the material, please come to us with those. So again, this is Matt Hiley, an overview or introduction of myself. I'm our Director of Business Development here at Tantalus Systems. We'll have Amanda Wood from Becker and Poliakoff on to talk about the federal funding programs and availability for us. Amanda's an expert on those funding programs, and then Mike Julian, our Chief Revenue Officer, is on as well. So between us, we should be able to address most of the questions and content that you might have for us. And from an agenda perspective, we'll provide an overview of funding, the programs that are available to you, any changes that might have happened over the past 4 or 5 months, so that you're aware of all of the current state of those, as well as application processes and any other issues that you might have regarding those. Please, you can question us while we're on the call. I'll also provide an overview of Tantalus Systems so you understand what we do and how we're involved and engaged here. And of course, at the end, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. And just as way of getting us kicked off, for those of you that are familiar with us, Tantalus Systems provides advanced metering and other solutions for public power electric cooperative utilities. We've done that for several years now, probably been in business for 30 years, but providing AMI for about 15 years. Over the past year or so, we've really seen an increase in the amount of funding that's both been requested and available through our federal government. And so about a year ago, we started working with Amanda and her firm in helping us, and then through us, our customers and other utilities understand what's going on from a funding perspective, the magnitude of funding available, the application process, the appropriate vehicles for you to participate in. And so the idea today is to make sure that we're keeping you abreast of that. As our changes, you're probably reading in the news quite a bit about all of the funding opportunities and availability that there is. I want to make sure that you're on top of that, and however we can help you both to understand and then access, we'll work with you on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda here. Amanda, let's see if we can advance here, and just let me know when you want to change the slides and I'll update them for you. You're on mute.
Thank you. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so I'm here in DC. We're tracking a lot of different funding streams. We are tracking the brand new funds that are coming available through the rollout of the IIJA, the infrastructure bill. Recurring annual funding streams. We've had lots of good options over the years that come back on an annual basis. And then also some extraordinary funds that you can spend right now through the American Rescue Plan Act. Next slide. Just to give you a sense of expectations for federal funding, in a typical year, we see about 1,000 federal grant programs. There are 26 federal agencies that provide more than $400 billion to public agencies. So in a typical year, there's quite a bit of funding, but this isn't a typical year for so many reasons. And over the past 18 months, we've seen $6.2 trillion in bonus federal spending. So the CARES Act, the Omnibus CRSA bill, the American Rescue Plan Act, and then the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in November 2021, an additional $1.2 trillion. So an extraordinary amount of funding, all to be accessed by public agencies like cities and counties and utilities. And to give you a sense of scale, if you think back to 2009, I think we all thought that ARA, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, was a large package, but it's really quite small compared to the investments the federal government is making right now. So just to say that there's quite a bit of funding out there, and we hope that we can help work with you to make sure you're getting your fair share. Next slide. So I'm often asked, what is DC thinking? I don't always have an answer for that, but I can tell you what sort of the thinking was behind the most recent bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I think what's exciting about it is really well aligned for public priorities. So if you are a utility, a city, a county, a unit of local government, any public agency, you're probably concerned about the same things: improving resilience against extreme weather, preparing for EV and decarbonization, equity, and really expanding the definition of essential infrastructure. I worked on the Hill for a number of years. We did lots of funding bills that provided money for sort of traditional stormwater, wastewater, roads, bridges. But the great news is that the federal government is catching up to what you all have known for a while, which is that essential infrastructure goes well beyond that. So really the thinking with this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is that they wanted to use federal investments in public spending to stimulate the economy, build and rebuild infrastructure, and to innovate. So it's good news for all of us. Next slide. So it's a great deal of funding. This will give you a sense of the formula allocations that are going to every state. If you look at your state, you'll see billions of dollars going to your state. Just know that there is a lot of funding going to states, but there is also a great deal of funding going directly to smaller units of government and agencies and utilities. So this just will give you a sense of scale. Next slide. So just going to walk you through some of the key components of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, now the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Now, we had a number of big spending bills leading up to this. And really, the earlier bills were about Band-Aids and plugging holes and recovery and response to the entities in the country that were hardest hit, whether it was education or local government, hospitals, things of that nature. But the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act really was a turning point. So we're going from those quick, immediate fixes or plugging those holes to really focused investment on infrastructure, clean energy, connectivity, and job creation. So just a few examples of the areas where the federal government intends to make these large investments: smart grid, $13 billion, broadband internet, $65 billion, and EV infrastructure, $7.5 billion. And I'll dig in a little deeper to some of these in future slides. Next slide. Okay, here are some examples of where the federal government is making investments in smart grid. So we see $5 billion over 5 years. And I should tell you, this is a bill that will be spent over 5 years. So it is a 5-year commitment to making these investments, which is exciting. The federal government typically does not think beyond what's right in front of them and one fiscal year. So it's exciting to have this long-term commitment to funding. So $5 billion for grants to stakeholders to improve resiliency. You'll see resiliency over and over again in this bill. $5 billion for new approaches, again, to improve grid resilience. And then $3 billion for smart grid technologies. Now, the truth of the matter is Congress has overlapped priorities through lots of these, and we are waiting for some details from the new DOT Joint Office and the new DOE office about how some of these funds will be expended. We expect to have more information on that in the coming weeks and months. Next slide. EV charging. This is an area where the federal government has started the rollout already. So commitment to $7.5 billion for grants for EV charging infrastructure and alternative fuel infrastructure. So the first $5 billion, if you're a state agency, you may be working on this now. First $5 billion allocations directly to states. States are putting together their plans right now, which they have to submit to DOE and DOT by the beginning of August. And then in September, they'll start to receive those funds. These are funds for projects along major corridors. And there is a priority consideration for rural areas and low and moderate income neighborhoods. So for all of these EV infrastructure funds, the federal government is going to cover 80% of the project cost. What we're waiting for right now and excited and really tracking is there's going to be additional $2.5 billion in competitive funding. So your agency, your unit of government will be able to apply directly to the federal government for funds for EV charging deployment. So that's coming soon, and we're tracking it closely. Next slide. And then broadband and cybersecurity. This marks the first time the federal government has ever made investments in cybersecurity that go beyond federal government agencies. Really a recognition that this is a pain point for you all and that they need to put some resources behind it. So in addition to this new broadband deployment grant, and we expect applications again to open soon, this broadband deployment program will be run out of a federal agency called NTIA, Department of Commerce. They've never done anything on this scale before. They've had some listening sessions and some proposed rulemakings. And again, we expect to have more details soon. But we'll have this broadband deployment program through NTIA. We'll then have a larger tranche of money through the Reconnect program, which is specific to rural areas. And then these new cybersecurity programs, the state and local cybersecurity grant program, and then one specifically for the energy sector, which is particularly exciting. Next slide. So I know you all have an interest in energy in general. So I want to sort of run through some of the additional funding streams that may not be connected exactly to smart grid, but I think will be of interest to you. We are going to see $550 million for energy efficiency and conservation block grants. The last time we saw this program funded was actually way back during ARA in 2009. Extraordinary flexible resource for local governments. There will again be funding to local governments for energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements. Waiting for details on this one, targeted for the fall of 2022. Energy improvement in rural and remote areas, an additional $1 billion to areas with a population of less than 10,000. And then grants for energy efficiency and resilience code adoption. So, your partners over at the city or county code office will likely have some resources to update those codes as well. Next slide, please. So with new programs and new ambitious programs comes the development of new offices. This is exciting. Department of Energy has classically, funded projects based on, sort of a pilot program or a test case or deployment of new technologies on a limited basis and evaluation. These new offices are going to be stood up or are being stood up right now in order to be able to scale this, to make sure that this is not just about testing innovative technologies, but really deploying them on a wide scale basis throughout the country. So the new Office of Clean Energy and Demonstrations is going to oversee $20 billion to launch clean energy projects nationwide. And then there are also some other changes happening at the Department of Energy. There's a new Undersecretary for Infrastructure, which is exciting. And then a new Undersecretary for Science and Innovation. So you can see that, I will say in prior stimulus packages, we have not seen this focus on energy. There is clearly a huge focus under the Biden administration and Congress in putting real resources behind it and putting people at the helms of these new sub-agencies that really have the knowledge to take this to scale. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Matt, who's going to give you a little overview of Tantalus Systems, and then I'll be back after Matt finishes to talk about a few more details when it comes to funding and things you can be doing right now and then to answer your questions.
Thanks, Amanda. I thought I'd take just a moment to make sure that everyone on the call is familiar with Tantalus and what we've done and where we're headed. And it dovetails really nicely in what Amanda's talked about in terms of our product portfolio, the market that we address, and then what she's able to access from a funding side. So just for those of you that aren't familiar with Tantalus, Tantalus has been around again for about 30 years and 15 or so of those delivering AMI and beyond AMI solutions, really focused over that time with purpose-built smart grid solutions for public power and electric cooperative utilities. So we focused on that over our history and worked very closely with the 200 plus customers that we have in place, both to deliver on the challenges that they face, as well as working with them to develop new products that are specifically geared towards that marketplace. A couple of the trends that we're seeing in market now, and I hope that these are familiar to you. They are to me. I'm out talking to customers and our sales team and others that are in the industry. These are trends that we see driving the utility market today, several of them, some of the macro trends at least. Of course, from a weather perspective, we've seen an increased number of extreme weather outages, whether it's mudslides, rain, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods that are affecting the delivery of electricity. So Tantalus has worked hard to understand how to best engage and address and where possible mitigate those with our utility customers. There's also been a big drive towards decarbonization. So in terms of electrification and addressing issues, whether it's relative to the environment, and then enabling the electrification of both devices and electric vehicles and such in an effort to decarbonize the marketplace. Tantalus, and I'll talk a little bit more about our product portfolio that helps to address that in just a moment. And then, of course, shifting consumer behavior in a couple different ways that we're seeing. One is through the proliferation and installation of DERs, so distributed energy resources, whether that's solar panels and inverters, electric vehicles, and other devices behind the meter that are becoming more prevalent in the industry, that utilities are both needing to understand what's going on and then how to address and leverage those relative to their placement on the distribution network. Tantalus is very keen on addressing those and working with our partners and utilities to accommodate those changes. And some of the portfolio that I'll review real quickly will show you how we're going about doing that. Now, from a broad perspective, what we've seen is the change that's happening and we think will continue to take place over time as the power grid changes from what we're seeing on the left side of the screen here, kind of the legacy grid, which is one way, delivery of power, pushing out of information towards a more integrated, smarter grid, smart grid, where both the distributed resources on the edge of the grid are impacting the grid itself. So the panels I mentioned, EVs coming online, we're going to see the Ford Lightning coming soon, and all of the both load that's going to encompass, as well as the benefits that can provide back onto the grid, as well as the information that's required as we see different endpoints proliferating on the system. So whether that's smart energy, thermostats, water heaters, and some of the others that I mentioned, solar inverters and EVs, utilities need to understand what's going on and react and proactively take care of incidents or issues that they're seeing on the grid. We're really working hard to enable and address those challenges towards that you're seeing with an integrated smart grid that's communicating with those devices on the edge of the network. Brief overview of our portfolio that is enabling those changes that I just mentioned. Tantalus builds out a comprehensive network for utilities that includes both the backhaul communications, and our capability there is it's pretty much whatever's available to us. So we have seen both long-range RF as a communications backhaul vehicle, and then also fiber, which you've heard talked about today, broadband. So fiber being deployed that we can leverage as a backhaul for metering data and information, cellular, WiMAX, satellite, whatever's needed from a backhaul perspective, and you have access to, we can pretty much deliver on, and we do that in a very secure manner. And also one of the things that we like to do at Tantalus is push data. So you're getting all the data back from the edge of the grid, as I mentioned, from your devices on the grid on an interval basis. So we're not batching up data and sending it back on a 4, 6, or 8 hour basis. You're getting that in near real time. One of the changes that we've seen, of course, is folks are expecting that near real time information, whether it's a utility or your customers want to see what's happening when it's happening, both from your perspective so that you can take advantage of or address any issues that are out there, and from a consumer's perspective so that they can either modify behavior or become familiar with how they should be reacting to incidents or time on the grid. Connected devices is the second tier that we have here, and that, of course, we enable edge-based computing through what you're seeing on the left part of the screen. In the middle there is our communications module that we deploy into all of our infrastructure devices and meters that are out there. So any device on the Tantalus network, TUNet, the Tantalus Utility Network, incorporates that communications module that, again, over time, we've seen that technology really enhanced in terms of its capability for over-there programming, processing capabilities. So we're only using a fraction of the processing power of our edge devices for AMI or metering purposes. We're ready to add applications as whether you install them or they become available on the network and leverage it through that communications module. And from a comprehensive portfolio perspective, you're seeing in the middle of the screen there our load control switch. So we're enabling applications like load management. Again, those leverage our communications module, but we're looking to provide comprehensive solutions, including load management, grid optimization, sensing capability, street lights, as you see on the page here, all part of the Tantalus Utility Network. Additionally, more and more we see municipalities that are multi-commodity, and we're able to, again, through the Tantalus Utility Network, address electric, water, and gas reads across your network, over our fixed network, excuse me, should you be a multi-commodity utility. And then from a software application side, we've worked to really enhance our user interface to the system. So you're seeing at the top of the screen newer user interfaces that we've developed, simple ways of accessing information depending upon roles that get you to information as quickly as possible and enable you to take advantage of the data that we're bringing back. So Tantalus, again, a comprehensive network that we build out for you, really looking to deliver on the applications that are available to us in today's world. It's not just meter reading anymore, but like I said, load management, software licensing for all different kinds of applications that you could be interested in. From a advance and evolve perspective, as I mentioned, we're seeing this change in behavior out there relative to distributed energy resources or devices behind the meter. About 3 months ago, Tantalus actually purchased a company called Congruitive, and Congruitive specializes in that space. So as you think about the need to access different devices that are being deployed across the network, behind the meter, and in homes, Congruitive is enabling that. It's integrating those DERs into our network and our software so that you're able to see, monitor, control devices that are behind the meter. As I talk to utilities, both prospects and customers that we have, there's a wealth of interest in what are we going to do to accommodate all of these devices that are coming online as we move forward. EVs is one that comes to mind, depending upon where you are in the country. there's a real growth in that, and we see that continuing. So charging capability, what are we doing to monitor and manage and control chargers? How are we handling solar inverters? Congruitive is helping us to fill that gap. So as you have a diversity of devices out there, we're able to help you with those. And then as we, from a broadband perspective, and what we see going on in the market from a deployment of fiber, we've actually are in process of bringing to market a product that we call the TrueSense Gateway that actually provides connectivity to those devices for the utility itself. So managed utility access for devices, whether that's over utility Wi-Fi or power line communications into the home, so that we're able to, again, see, manage, and monitor devices on the network. Beyond that, TrueSense implying sensing capability. We're doing sub-cycle monitoring of the network. So as you are with this device, you're able to see and accommodate any type of anomalies you might see on the network, and doing that in a very sub-cycle manner so that you're very familiar and aware of what's happening and can proactively address that. This, again, is designed right now for a fiber deployment. We will have additional iterations coming out that will be able to accommodate different communications platforms for backhaul purposes. But anyways, Tantalus is really working to evolve our technology. And as we see that happening, a lot of this good stuff that I've just mentioned can be funded, or there are funds that apply to the acquisition and deployment of those. So I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda and run you through some of the current funding programs and how to take advantage of those. Amanda, thanks, there you go.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm calling this a current funding opportunity because we need to lay the groundwork for this now. So I just want to give you sort of a tip on this. So the great news is this program is entering into its third year. It doubled in size last year. Now, based on the infrastructure bill, will be funded at $1 billion a year for the next 5 years. Extraordinary opportunity for funding. You know, we have not yet seen the awards from the last round. This is this sort of strange federal funding stream where you apply to your state reviews your application, makes sure it's eligible, and then forwards it on to FEMA. So there's that extra step, which is taking a little bit of extra time. So, you know, all federal funding is supposed to be awarded by the end of the federal fiscal year. So they will need to release the final funding levels and funded projects at some point this summer or early fall. I'm hoping they won't take all their time to do it, but I do anticipate that even before these funds from the last fiscal year are awarded, they will reopen this program for applications. So I see that happening probably this summer. What I would urge you to do is work really closely with the folks in your emergency services department. You're going to want to make sure that you have updated fully your local hazard mitigation plan to make sure that it reflects these needs. It does not need to be a specific solution, doesn't need to be a specific vendor, certainly. It needs to be reflected somehow that you all want to make sure that the resiliency of your energy delivery system is part of that local hazard mitigation plan. In a lot of communities, that local hazard mitigation plan is held by your county. So now is a great time to be laying the groundwork to be able to move quickly to apply for that when it does reopen. Each state will have its own internal deadline. Once they release the grant this summer, we'll be able to research those for you. We'll be able to provide draft language for your application, but we need to get over that first hurdle of updating your local hazard mitigation plan. So I would just suggest putting some attention and energy towards that. And if you need model language for that, we can provide that as well. Next slide. This is just the most timely thing to be doing right now, to be honest with you. You all may have remembered that last year, Congress passed and the president signed into law the American Rescue Plan Act. This was $350 billion to states and local governments, 2,000 cities and counties in the US receiving direct allocations from Treasury that can flow down to all their sub-agencies, including utilities within the city or county. You know, it's so timely because the first half of this funding came out last May, and the second half will be released in May or June of this year by Treasury, literally direct deposited into city and county bank accounts, which means that right now, cities and counties are prioritizing how they want to spend the second half of that funding. These allocations are sizable. Get in touch with me. I'll research your community's allocation. And what I am finding is that sometimes news about this funding has not made its way down to every sub-agency, city agency, county agency, utility in a community. And while you may not have heard about this funding, all of these solutions are absolutely an allowable use of this funding. So this is the time to raise your hand and say, hey, I know we're getting this money. I know how much we're getting because Amanda told me. And can we be considered for inclusion, you know, in the spending plan for the second half of funding? So please, you know, get in touch with me. I found that in a lot of communities, the first half of funding that was received last year, you know, there was some, you know, some holes to fill, and there were some budget gaps, and communities are really conservative in how they spent the funding. But really, the federal thinking on this was they want to make your community whole and then allow you to stimulate the economy through public spending on some of the ambitious things that you've been wanting to do: infrastructure, innovation, government service. So again, now is the time to be talking about this. Next slide, please. So we're really fortunate that in this space, there are lots of federal agencies, particularly with that sort of resiliency focus, that are willing to make investments in the kind of work that you all want to be doing in your community. So whether it's Treasury with American Rescue Plan Act funds, Homeland Security with BRIC funds, Department of Energy, Department of Agricultural Rural Utility Service, even HUD funding through your Community Development Block Grant funds. There are a lot of ways to tackle this, so we can help you do that. No penalty for pursuing multiple federal funding sources. Most of these do not have a match requirement. The only one I can think of right now that has a match requirement is BRIC has a small match requirement, and we anticipate that the EV funding will have a 20% match requirement. Next slide. So roughly half of the work that I do is directly with public agencies that are my client. So I do a lot of federal funding, and along with those, you know, companies like Tantalus that are working in partnership with public agencies. So since I left the Hill 16 years ago, I've worked through a lot of funding endeavors, and there are some key things that I want to point out that I think will help to make you successful. So first thing, people are like, what can I spend it on? It's not a shopping list. This is about use case. So I want to talk with you, understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then match you up to the best federal funding stream for you based on use case. So let's talk through that. Important to show a local commitment to this effort. You know, if we can get letters of support from others in the community, you know, and then again, coordinate with local agencies. The best example of that is that you'll need to coordinate with emergency management in order to update that local hazard mitigation plan for the BRIC grant. You'll need to coordinate with the budget office on these American Rescue Plan Act funds, or maybe city or county administrators. I like to have really early conversations with federal program managers. So as soon as they're ready, I love to go in before solicitations are released, pitch projects, get feedback. So if we identify something you want to pursue early, that's the sort of thing that we can do. Some grants require research partnerships. As I said, DOE is actually moving from that sort of research and validation and pilot project to wide scale deployment. So I think we'll see less of a need for research partnerships, but some of these grants with research partnerships are fantastic as well. It gives you a chance to show off the really innovative work you're doing. Data is great. I think everyone who works in this area, you know, enjoys and reviews data on a daily basis. Let's use that data to our advantage to tell our story, back it up with some numbers. And then as somebody who works on Capitol Hill, I know very well that, you know, your members of Congress and senators want to advocate for you, want to bring funding back to your community. So I always do outreach to senators, members of Congress, prepare draft letters of support, prepare talking points, make sure that they have what they need in order to advocate for you. And then demonstrate a history of solid stewardship of grant funding. Funding begets funding. So I think people feel like, oh, I can only apply for one grant, or I got money last year, I'll never get money this year. That is not the case. I see time and time again the same communities getting funding because frankly, they've done a good job of spending it. The federal agency is really pleased with how they've spent it and wants to continue to give them funding. So with that, Matt, do we have any questions?
We did, Amanda. We had several questions come in actually. Let me, the first was, your slide states that most of the funding programs will open in the fall of 2022. There's some concern that date may slip a little bit. Maybe there's been some comments on there's a lot of preparation yet to do and that will be later. How confident are you in the timing that's been presented?
You know, I'm just based on my conversations, I'm pretty confident. And the reason I'm confident is because by the time we get to the end of the federal fiscal year, we'll have had 11 months since passage of this bill. I know that there are new grant programs. There are new professionals in some of these offices. There are restructuring of agencies. But I do think that there is an extraordinary amount of pressure to roll out these programs before the end of the federal fiscal year, or we'll just get backed up. It's a 5-year program. We really need to start rolling these out by the end of this federal fiscal year. We're already seeing a lot of activity. I mean, we saw the state EV program come out, and that's been, I think, about 6 weeks ago already. So they're making progress. NTIA did all their listening sessions on broadband several months ago. They should be ready to roll out some of those programs soon. So I am confident that, you know, by the end of the federal fiscal year, which is the end of September, that we're going to see these programs.
Okay, thanks. There's another question. I'm curious if any of the funds were available for water or sewer infrastructure.
Definitely funds for water and sewer available as well. Huge expansions of the EPA state revolving loan fund for wastewater and drinking water, clean water and drinking water. So yes, there's definitely funding through specific EPA programs as well as through American Rescue Plan Act dollars.
Okay, are there any updates on BRIC applications that were previously submitted?
Yeah, we're still waiting on those. I'm not confident we'll see that in the next couple of weeks. I think that's probably going to be a summer rollout. And as I said, I could see them releasing the FY22 solicitation before the FY21 awards come out, just to start that process, because it is that sort of odd program where there is a deadline for states to submit the projects to FEMA. So states will be collecting projects directly from folks like you and then reviewing them and then submitting them on to FEMA. So it's a long application process, longer than most, but I would expect those awards this summer.
Okay, can the funds be used, the federal funds be used to reimburse for local funds that have been used for a project?
No, I'm afraid not. Federal funds are generally not available on a reimbursable basis. But, so I always encourage folks, if you have the funding locally to go ahead and do this, do this. Go ahead and do that because you don't want to wait on federal funding. Federal funding can always be used for renewal and expansion and really, doing those extra things you want to do. So don't let the potential of federal funding slow you down. There will be federal funding available on a recurring basis, but it will not be available on a reimbursable basis.
Okay. How can I find out how much American Rescue Plan Act funds my community? So how my community has received, excuse me. How do I find that out?
Yeah, I'm happy to research that for you. You'll see my email address at the end of the presentation. Get in touch with me. Happy to do that for you. And then I can also help you put together whatever justification you need within your own community for use of those funds for these solutions.
Okay, and one last question. Are there any charges for Amanda's services?
Matt, do you want to take that?
There'll be no, yeah, no, we'll that's through Tantalus, so we'll handle that for you, no charges for Amanda's services. We just look forward to helping you guys out as much as we can through the process. So those are the questions I have received in chat. Again, if there are a few more or anyone has questions, please submit those through chat. We've got a couple more items to run through here real quickly. So again, Amanda, I think this is we've gone through this a bit in terms of your how to succeed in terms of application. Any more comments about how you can help?
Yeah, so just know that I'm here as a resource to you. So let's talk. I'll figure out what grants you're going to be competitive for. I would never recommend pursuing funding where I don't think you can be successful. One thing we didn't talk about, but I always like to do is take a look at if you have any unexpended prior year federal funds from other projects. Federal agencies like to get that money out the door, and we can often reprogram funds quickly. So let's explore that. We can provide draft language for applications, help with budget justifications, edit your application. As I said, putting you face to face with program managers at federal agencies to pitch your project. I can help with that as well. We'll want to engage your congressional delegation and then help you expedite drawdown of awarded funds. I think there are so many misconceptions about federal funding and onerous reporting and things of that nature. And I do this all day, every day, and I don't find it particularly onerous. So let me make it easy for you to pursue these funds, and we can sort of walk through this process together. Next slide.
Okay, Amanda, one question just came in as we were talking. Will investor-owned utilities, so IOUs, qualify for any of these funds, especially where small and rural towns, they supply small and rural towns?
Yeah, generally speaking, federal funding goes to public agencies and nonprofits. There are some exceptions. Some of the hardening funding, I think we will see some eligibility for IOUs, but generally speaking, federal funding is focused on public agencies.
Great. Okay, again, folks, any additional questions, you can write to Amanda or me. I'll show and forward our emails in just a moment. Just from a next step perspective, we've gone through, I think, a session to outline our knowledge here, the capabilities that we have. Amanda's an expert in this space, so certainly we want to help you as you can. Give us a call, let us know whether it's through me, Amanda, your account manager, or any of our sales folks that you're in contact with that you'd like to understand more about the funding capacity and availability that's out there and how we can help you. So we can help you understand, as we've gone through here, what's applicable, the best way to go about applying, and how to succeed. So we love to help you do that. Like we said, determine your direct allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And then the key item that Amanda's mentioned to me several times is updating that LHMP for upcoming BRIC grants. So make sure you're in contact with your emergency management folks around that to update it. Tantalus does have, just going forward, a funding landing page. So if you go to the tantalus.com site, under resources, we have a funding page. We keep that updated with both events like this webinar that are currently happening, as well as an overview of many of the funds that Amanda mentioned on this call, so that you're aware of and can go back to it anytime you'd like, our funding page. We'd encourage you to do that and then contact us as you have interest. I do appreciate everyone's time today. We're just, as I thought, around 45 minutes after the hour, and can conclude the session now. Thank you for everything, all the questions you provided in your time today. We'll come out with a follow-up email, the link to the webinar, so that you can peruse it at your viewing pleasure if you'd like to see it again, and then email for contact information for any questions that you might have for Amanda and me or others. Okay, Amanda, thank you for your time, and team, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.